Hello, I'm Ronan Chris Murphy from Recording Bootcamp, and welcome to my recording show. At Recording Bootcamp, I've been teaching workshops around the world, doing online training and stuff since about 2003. But my day job is still making records, and I've been lucky enough to carve out a niche that's allowed me to work with really just some of the most amazing drummers on the planet. So I've had a chance to work, recording or mixing with Terry Bozzio, Bill Bruford, Louis Bergassam, Pat Mastelotto, Jerry Marotta, Enrique Pla, Ralph Humphrey, Joey Boisnel, Gregg Bissonette, Victor Bassetti, Van Romain, Bill Rieflin, even Alan White and Danny Carey. But those last two were just playing percussion, so I don't know if that really counts. But anyway, I finally added to the list somebody I've wanted to work with for a long time, my friend Benny Greb from Germany. Really one of the most exciting kind of drummers and creative thinkers about drums and percussion. So it was awesome to get a chance to work with him. And I had this idea after the sessions, let's pull out a couple cameras and we do a nerdy gear run through. So what mics we used, what toms he used, what cymbals, etc., etc. So what was supposed to be 5 minutes of gear talk ended up being in-depth half-hour discussion about drum sounds, not only the gear aspects and the equipment aspects, but also the philosophy of drum sounds, about creating the right sound for the song, approaches, how musicians, drummers can interact with the recording process. So it ended up being far more than I expected. And so I hope you will check it out and dig it. And speaking of checking stuff out, after we'd shot the video, I had a chance to watch Benny's new DVD, The Art and Science of Groove, and it's kind of amazing. Most of the people who watch my show are probably recording people. You might think I don't need a drum video. Well, this is sort of a drum video, but it's also very much a video of just about groove, about creating groove and percussion as part of the music. So if you're a producer at all, you should check this out. Even if you're a producer of electronic music, the way he approaches and explains groove and interaction with the other music is pretty awesome. I mean, honestly, I'm trying to steal everything about his technique I can about doing sort of video-based training because he's so good at it. But that's that. Let's get into in-depth half hour. So grab a beer or something and sit down and check out all the cool stuff I was able to learn from Benny. And I was also excited to know that he and I are basically brothers from separate mothers when it comes to the ideas about drum sound and drum production. So it was fun to learn a lot and also find a brother in arms about all things drum recording. So check it out. Hello, I am Ronan from Recording Bootcamp, and we are at the beautiful Prosdocimi Studios in Villa Prosdocimi in North Italy, and I'm here with my friend Benny Greb. So if you're a drummer, Benny needs no introduction. If you're not a drummer, or maybe don't know about him, you can just check out next month's issue of Modern Drummer, where his beautiful face is on the cover, or his website, bennygreb.com, or the tons and tons of videos on YouTube with thousands and thousands of people just drooling over his playing. So
very well said.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Exactly. So why are we here in Italy? Benny and I are here in Italy to eat really well and drink really well. And in the time in between that, work on some music. We are here. I'm producing a record for a Italian artist, Mike Third, and Benny is one of 3 great drummers on the album. So we've been cutting tracks all day. Things are sounding great. And I just thought a few of you who are into drum recording might want a quick rundown of the gear we used on the recording side of things and on the drum performance end of things. So anybody who's followed a lot of my videos knows I'm kind of in love with Shure KSM 32s for overheads. So they're going into A-Design's Pacifica mic pre's into a Manley Verimu. And this whole record is actually cut to tape. So we're actually recording to tape, mixing off of tape, down to tape. So never hit any kind of converters or anything, just hit an Otari 2-inch machine. But and these are picking up a huge part of the drum sound and that drum sound. So Benny will run you through, what are we using for cymbals here?
Okay, These are Meinl by Zans cymbals. They're hand hammered in Turkey. This is actually my signature line. I designed them with Meinl. The goal was to get a more aged sound, basically. That's why they are rough on the surface. They're almost like sandpaper.
Yeah.
So I don't like when they are high and trebly and shimmery.
Yeah, I noticed all day they were real smooth, even on the heavier rock things where you're kind of digging into it.
Right.
They never got harsh, which was really nice.
And the British engineer that Toby Wood, who also worked at Abbey Road, he had a great saying. He says like, "Oh, those cymbals are beautiful. They have their say, and then they go away."
Yeah,
which is actually what they do. It's like the ride cymbal. It doesn't get out of control even when you crash it. So it leaves. Articulation is there, sound is there. It has wash, but then it makes place for all the other information that might be there. And the sizes are: this is a 14-inch sand head. This is an 18-inch sand thin crash, a 20-inch sand ride, and a 22-inch crash ride. And it has these sizzles in them, and I use it as a mighty crash, but it's also nice as a jazz ride. It's very thin. I love that demonstration. If you do that,
wow!
So you can really, it's very thin, so it responds fast. You can start it with your finger. This is a 14-inch trash head. It's basically a trashy sounding sound. And I always apply in the last couple of, like in the last year or so, I apply this jingle ring on top. It's a Meinl jingle ring. Today it's another one because the set was supplied by a wonderful guy, a friend of mine, Michele Leli, who lives here and has a very similar setup, and he was nice enough to provide it.
We're very grateful for that.
Yeah, great
so,
set.
Speaking of cymbals, a lot of kind of less experienced drummers might not understand this. When we did the first tune, we were listening back, and we kind of listened to the playback, and all kind of thought the hi-hats are just overpowering everything. What did you ask me to do to fix it?
Did I ask you to do something to fix it?
No.
Oh, okay. I was like, holy shit.
That's being our point. He may be modest, but he basically said, wow, that hi-hat is way too loud. Let's go do this again and let me fix that for you. Again, that was, known to be the genius of John Bonham. He'd come into the control room, go, the floor tom's not cutting through, hi-hat's a little too loud, and not ask Eddie Kramer to go change the mics or anything. Say, let's go do another one.
Right.
Dig into that a little harder, articulate a little bit more,
and
lay back on the hat.
You might think it's well, but when you then listen back to it, it might be the room, it's not that it's better or worse, but it's just different. And then when you hear the real truth, it's like, okay, I have to adjust to that, because some drummers sometimes think like, but I played it correctly.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So the truth is what comes out there, and then or the drummer can hopefully adjust to that.
Yeah.
And it's usually a better result if you really trust that. And drummers have generally, I have that at my drum camps too, they have a problem with controlling cymbal sounds, which is natural because it is an instrument that was put together. I mean, if you look at it analytically, wooden shells with plastic membranes and metal plates, if you hit them with the same intensity, will they sound at the same volume? No. So you have to actually, and this is a coordination and independence exercise too, to actually control them and play them less, then you need the toms or something. So this is something that you have to get into your system, and it's almost like a forgotten art. It's like how to get really the drums mixed well for overheads. So you can use the overheads as drum mics, like you and many great producers do, and not as cymbal mics.
Because that's a big thing, especially if you got a good drummer, a good drum set. When you can really pull up the overheads, you can get a really nice organic open drum sound that blends really well. It's been really punchy, but if the drummer is playing any element just completely out of perspective, you need to pull those overheads down, and the engineer needs to start making the drum mix rather than letting the drummer make the drum mix.
And we had a therapy session yesterday, almost like where Ronan opened up about all the horrible things we do as drummers, and how
much I love you guys.
Of course. Right. But it's true that sometimes we drummers, like, we want to expect something, we want to hear our drums a certain way, but we don't play it that way. So it's very important for us to be able to mix that with our movements, basically our technique, so that it makes a pleasant sound. And what I always tell drummers is, like, record yourself with an iPhone, record yourself with one of those Zoom recorders or anything. And then this is then the dark side of the force. If you then say, like, the cymbals are too loud now on these microphones.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like, no. Or even if it's maybe a little bit harsh or something, but if you get your drum set sound nice and full on a device like this, it will sound great anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it teaches, no matter what, even if it's not like perfectly linear or representative, it will teach you how to adjust and EQ your drum sound.
Yeah.
And that's super cool. So.
Yeah. And just by the way, you might have heard him mention, just like I do recording boot camps all around the world, we're actually doing one in Italy next week. Benny also does drum camps in a lot of different places around the world. And if you go to bennygreb.com, you can get information about those. But let's get into wooden shells with plastic skins on them.
Yes.
So for me, when I'm miking a drummer, especially a good drummer who can balance himself, I like to try and get most of my drum sound from just these overheads and a kick drum mic. And I'm not a Shure endorser or anything like that, but they tend to be a big part of my drum sounds. We're using the Shure Beta 52.
Love that one.
And the studio here actually has a Rain Dirk console, big old analog console, and with very good mic pre's on it. So outside of the A-Designs Pacifica for the overheads, which is my favorite overhead combo, we're using the Rain Dirk mic pre's for all of the other things. But we have a slightly bigger kick drum than we're used to hearing from you.
Do you record with any EQ or do you?
Very rarely.
Okay.
Very rarely. Mostly because I like to be able to kind of fine tune and balance. And really when it gets to mix time, I'm generally just doing a lot of kind of subtractive EQ. Because especially one of the reasons I like the Beta 52 is it's got its own curve that's kind of flattering to kick drums. It gives you a little bit of love in the bottom and a little extra punch in the top. So usually just with placement, and that's one of those things, we got it right actually first time. We didn't have to move it around, but a lot of things people reach to EQ for, you know, you can actually deal with moving it closer to the beater head, a little farther back, changing to a different mic, because that's not always the perfect mic. And the thing is, you know, once, you know, EQ is not against the law, but it's not a free lunch. So when you start EQing things, there is some negative pushback. So if I can get things as close as possible, I usually don't have to do too much at mix time.
So it's basically on your side the same thing. If you hear a sound that you don't like, but you hear it in the room, you will try to fix it on your side, not with EQ, but with placement of mics.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, again, you always end up needing to do some kind of EQ for a rock or a pop record just because there's so much density of frequencies. You know, in a drum set, we need to carve out a little room in there. So one, they just play together better, but also carve out a little room for the vocals and the guitars because they got to be on record sometimes too, you know.
Can't help it,
What are we using for a kick drum? Again, a little bigger than we're used to seeing. You have?
Right, and the last time I switched to a 20-inch, mainly because of my trio. I wanted it more direct and not as macho-ish as I used to like it. But this is a 22-inch, 22 by 17 and a half, if I'm not mistaken.
What is it?
You mean the material?
Yeah, like who made it? What is it?
Okay, it's the Sonar drums. I'm a Sonar endorser. I love Sonar drums. For me, they make the best real like drum kits because you have many drum manufacturers that have great tom-toms, a great snare drum, a great bass drum. But if you listen to them as a family, again, for me, it's important to get this as one nice balancing thing into the overheads and room mics. So that's what sometimes is said about vintage drums, or when people love vintage drums, or you can say that about the Sonars, that they have like da 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 da. You can get all the drums to have the same sustain and the tonal qualities. With other manufacturers, sometimes they all sound great, but you have a bop, da, da, bop. So you have different character, different families. The toms are a family, the bass drum is one thing, the snare drum. So if I turn the snares off on the snare, I can get a timbale sound that sounds like a higher tom-tom, or I can get a tom-tom sound, as we did today as well, like that almost sounds like the bass drum, and it's one family. So I like that, because it's also... It makes it easier to make the drums sound like they are in one room, because it's like one thing. So, Sonar drums. This is the S Classics series. I think they're not made anymore, but they're birch shells, very thin birch shells. And this is a 22 by 17 and a half. This is a 10 by 8 and 16 by 16. I love 16 by 16. When they are 16 by 14, I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like a lot of air. I like a lot of
Yeah.
movement. For me, a floor tom has to feel like you would hit a dead pig. basically. Because it's like so I don't like them suspended. I like floor toms. I like
Yep.
the resistance a little bit. It
Yep.
has to be a steady thing.
Yeah.
And and this is my 13 by 5.75.
Which you don't see every day.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the German thing. It has to be very specific. Huh? So it is the signature model I came up with for Sonar drums. They gave me the opportunity to give my ideas in, and I built my dream snare drum. So I really love that drum, and I try to take it or have it everywhere I go. So this is a favorite of mine.
Yeah. So miking on those, again, we've got the Beta 52 there. And one thing you'll notice, we've definitely, Mike Third, his music has a big nod back to a lot of classic stuff like Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin sort of sounds, but still want it to have some punch and not be totally vintage. So we've got a hole in the front head, which again, if you want punchy articulated, you gotta cut a hole in the front head or take the front head off. I mean, if you're doing like old school, like Elvin Jones from the 60s or something, awesome. But if you want some punch, you gotta be able to get past that front head. And we didn't have to do much because the drums were tuned really well, but a little bit of dampening with a pillow in there or actually a curtain from somewhere here at the villa, just to keep it, tighten it up, because a lot of people enjoy having it open. It sounds really good when you're back here playing, but then when you put a mic in there, it can sound just really hollow and has a lot of trouble cutting through if you got big bass or big guitars. For the toms, classics, not reinventing the wheel here. Sennheiser 421s. And what's cool about these is they can take a lot of abuse, they can take a lot of level, but they've also got a presence peak. So they actually will help toms and stuff cut through a little bit. So if you get big fat tom here, something like a 421 is going to give you a little extra boost up in the high mids, which can help it articulate through guitars and things like that. So single mic, top only. We didn't mic the bottom. I almost never mic the bottom of drums just because, you know, the more mics we put in, the more phase problems we're going to have, the more smearing and less articulation we're going to get. So we managed to get some big, punchy things. Same thing with the snare. We got a short SM57. You know, not reinventing the wheel here, but it just tends to work over and over again. Yeah. And just hop. And if the drummer plays well and you get the mic or the drums tuned right, you really don't need that, because a lot of that crack and presence that people might put a bottom mic on the snare for, we're actually getting it from the overheads.
And I have to say, many engineers overuse the bottom mic.
Yeah.
Like I sometimes have the feeling it makes the snare smaller and like
where you need that a lot is when the sort of tone or pitch of the drum is overpowering the punch or the crack. So if you got something that's just like gong, 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 and you don't get that ka, ka, that's one of the reasons why they'll go through. But, you know,
ghost notes, clarity and stuff like that. Yeah,
but if you actually tune the drums so you get the right balance of tone, musicality, crack, and punch, I usually find a single 57, KSM 32s, or again, I tend to like cardioid large diaphragm or medium diaphragm condensers. I just like how the mid-range goes. We talked about this at dinner, phase.
Yeah.
Space pair of cardioids, we are 100% guaranteed to have phase problems. But we checked it in mono, made sure it didn't get too bad, and everything else on the album is actually extremely phase coherent. So, yeah, if we have a little bit on the drums, we're kind of okay on that. You know, we're just going to find when it goes to mono, we lose a little bit of shimmer and presence on the cymbals. We just want to make sure that the snare doesn't start just conk, 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 sounding like too honky, too hollow. And actually all the drums will start to get bad. But this is actually not our only snare, and it looks like you're storing stuff over there.
Right, this is something I do when I travel. I didn't have a second snare drum here, so I asked the guys around here. This is, I think,
it's one of the Stocco drums, which are really
drums,
nice.
Exactly. Yeah. So they had it here.
Really nice drums.
Right, they have it here in the studio. So I just needed another 14-inch snare drum where I can turn that into this like 80s sound.
And what are you doing there?
And the thing is,
not something I've really seen.
It's not that much tuned deeper than the main snare. A little bit, but not that much. And what I do is I just take a spare head. I don't even have to unpack it. It doesn't matter. I just place it on there, and it lowers the pitch automatically, like one step, even more. Physics behind it is more mass, like you know,
slower
that. So
vibrations. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get deeper pitch
Yep.
basically. So that is really great for that, and also it shortens the sustain because
Yep.
there's something on there. So you get the lower pitch, the shorter sustain, which gets you very near to that floof sound that you really
Which
want.
actually worked great on the first tune we did today. Yeah.
And it's the easiest thing. I get questions about this almost more than anything.
Yep.
Like, how do you get that sound? I would say it's the easiest sound to get. Like on the whole, like.
So $1 million tip there.
Yeah.
Keep extra heads hanging around the studio.
I mean, if you really want to be super safe, you can cut it out a little smaller and gaffer it in, so you can do rim shots as well.
Yep.
But for me, rim shots don't work that well with that sound anyway.
Yep.
So it's also a good reminder. And if something goes sideways, I can still use the head.
Yeah.
So.
And we actually have an Audio-Technica 4050 over there. Mike, I like a lot. It's one of the great bang for your buck.
Also for singing,
mics.
right? And
Yeah, they're great for singing, great for guitars. Yeah, the 4050 and the Audio-Technica 4060 are really awesome mics.
Yeah.
And when I first set it up, again, we're trying to keep things minimal. We're on 24 track, and that's all the tracks we've got. So we're not going to throw up a bunch of extra mics we're not going to use. So I originally put that up to be sort of a hi-hat / auxiliary snare mic, but after we did a first couple passes on the thing, I realized we actually had plenty of hi-hat just in the overheads. I wasn't going to have to reinforce that at all. And this ended up being a bigger feature in the tune than I was predicting. So we ended up moving the mic over, not close mic, because I didn't want it to be, in your face for this auxiliary thing. So it's mic'd about, a foot or so out, that far for you Europeans.
A foot?
Yeah, this much of a meter out. And the other last mic that we've got is, it's actually been moved, but we have a Perlman TM1, which is, again, Perlman Microphones, another company whose mics I love. It's very similar to the old Neumann U47s. And that was actually about this far off the ground, kind of out, and not quite in front of the kick drum, but a little off to the toms. Originally started over here, which again is a really good point because a lot of times you can get like the whole kit, a really nice balance of it. But I kind of found just in this room and this kit, it was sort of like too bright. We were getting too much of sort of the hi-hat and the bottom of the snare. So I just moved it over here, blended it in. So I've got that option there. And that actually Rain Dirk mic pre into a Empirical Labs distressor.
Can you say one more thing about you not aiming the 52 straight in, but angling it a little? Yeah,
there's two reasons for that. One is I kind of call it audio judo, because there's an incredible amount of force. I mean, we're in this 500-year-old villa, and the drums will shake the building.
Yes.
But so there's a lot of power. So if you kind of put the mic in, again, those mics, most good dynamics will take a lot of abuse, but it takes a little of the direct pressure off. It's sort of like getting punched like that or getting punched like that. Hurts a lot less that way. So it's a little less direct impact into the mic, a little less hit into the mic pre, but it's also, this is a cardioid, a directional mic. So it puts this really loud thing you keep hitting all day a little bit more in the rejection zone. Over this way, pointing at the floor tom, it starts to put the snare drum into the rejection zone.
So you get a more isolated bass drum.
Exactly. Yeah. So so we don't have to necessarily resort to gating or anything like that. A little bit of snare in there is going to be okay. But
would you still do it if it wouldn't have the impact benefit? To just isolate that?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So that is an important factor really for you.
Yeah, for me, and it's amazing how often just sort of going in there, pointing off to the side, it's sort of like done.
Oh, cool.
It works incredibly well. For me, it gets a balance that I really like.
Wow.
And
I'll try that
it's
out.
kind of amazing how often just kind of putting it there, getting the drums kind of tuned right, gets you almost there. Of course, if you want more beater attack, we'll move it farther into the drum. We want more blossoming from the kick drum, we'll just bring it out. And, sometimes, especially for more like mellow acoustic jazz, singer-songwriter stuff, might even bring that farther out. And truth be told, for that kind of music, as much as I love the Beta 52, it usually gets fired. So usually try and pull in something like a AKG D12, or actually even if it's not a basher kind of record, that Perlman microphone, I'll actually bring that in close enough where it's mostly a kick drum with some other metal and then my overheads. And it's pretty awesome how much we can get with just 3 mics that's, again, breeze and big and round. and doesn't use up a lot of tracks, has pretty solid phase, and ends up working really well.
Cool.
And lastly, again, here's the big debate. Real drummers would never have to put any kind of dampening on their heads to get it right. Isn't that correct?
That's why I have those, which no one sees. Right?
Exactly.
If it's this jelly stuff, then no one can say I can't tune. No, here's another thing I actually do. I always have this in my stick bag. That.
Yeah.
So I pull that apart into little pieces, and I throw it into the floor tom.
Mm-hmm.
Because what it does, when you tune the reso head a little bit higher than the better head, that rings longer.
Mm-hmm.
If you put like compression on anything, or if you just listen closely, that's enough. You will have and you hear a higher sustain, which sounds stupid.
Yeah.
Because it sounds for us like a question. It's always like, right?
Exactly.
This is nothing what we like. And you, like the typical, if there is such a thing, like tom sound that you want, it has a pitch bend down, if at all. Like a do, right? So I put that into the drum, and what it does is it rests against the reso head, and when I hit it, it does doom.
Yeah.
So it jumps up, goes down. It's an acoustic, like a
it's a great
natural
it's
noise
a great
gate.
trick. Yeah. And it's smooth and falls off, in a natural sort of way. It's not
Right.
ultra dead.
Right, and it doesn't kick the first. It doesn't kill the first hit.
Yeah.
Right. If you would tape the bottom head a lot, you would even choke the first hit, but then you can have the first one freely.
Yeah, it's a really good trick. And of course, I mentioned that because actually in the secondary live room upstairs a few years ago, Alberto Stocco, who's one of the other drummers on this, recorded him, and there's a YouTube video, about 50,000 people watched it, and several of them put nasty comments, because part of it is me laying on the floor, taping things up and deadening, and nasty people wrote nasty things to tell me I was an idiot, and real drummers and real engineers would never have to do that.
Right.
And I think Terry Bozzio is like almost the only drummer I've ever worked with who really doesn't have to do that. He's just such a ninja for for recording drums.
I think Simon Phillips is one guy that we have to mention. I mean, there are a couple of guys, but for me the question always is like, what is the end result?
Yeah.
What is the end result? And in many years, I mean, let me put this politely.
Yeah.
I just think that. How do I put this politely?
Yeah.
What do I even want to say? No, it's the industry spent a lot of spilled a lot of myths over the planet of that the longest sustain is the holy grail of drum sounds.
Yeah.
So you measure how good you can tune and how good your drum is even.
Yeah.
Like how long the toms sound.
Yeah.
And actually this is the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah.
And in the studio, but also live, when you are live and you have a floor tom that rings forever.
Yeah.
Like no one actually wants that.
Yeah.
If you have a got to.
Yeah.
That's the most horrible thing. If you have subwoofers beneath the stage, you get feedback problems.
Yeah.
So I like an open drum sound.
Yeah.
And I like sustain, but I like controlled sustain.
Yeah, and there's times where that really over-the-top sustain is awesome.
Yeah.
If there's enough space in the arrangement,
Right.
things like that, the tempo's down enough, it's awesome to have a tom go, boom, and all that real estate. But, if you've got a bass in there going, bum, 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 especially if you're doing kind of funk sort of stuff, it'll just really start to smear out the groove and the punch of the drums.
And to be honest, I mean, of course, and what those people maybe think is it can't be an excuse for not being able to tune.
Yeah.
That is, of course, the drum has to sound nice.
Yeah.
And then it's maybe something to take a little bit of sustain away.
Yeah.
But if you say oh, this sounds horrible, and then I just tape it down, then it will always sound horrible, and so it sounds short or horrible, fine.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, last time I was doing a record with Gregg Bissonette, I think he was in the studio 10 minutes before he said, okay, do you guys got gaffer tape?
Right.
And, just to do this, because we were doing up-tempo sort of pop tune. And, the great drummers know that, getting the drums right for the tune, is the job, which is why you see the same session guys on hard rock and heavy metal records, jazz records, pop, all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
Because they know how to walk in and go, oh, this is the gig, this is the tune.
Right.
And
it's a great thing that you then you work with the same heads,
Yeah.
but you have things like this, lap clats they're called, I love them. Yeah. Or like...
Similar to Moonjaws.
Right.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So you have your sound and then you can react and change things up.
Yeah, and I like things a lot like this too because you can, you know, a lot of times the drum's good, it just needs a little bit of dampening, and we can go, you know, right in here, like, you know, and just sort of half on the rim, half on the head, just to scale it back, or if we need to do some really blunt work, we can drop it more.
And what you can also do,
put
it on the cymbal.
Yeah.
Or underneath the cymbal. They will even stick underneath the cymbal, so I like that.
Yeah, especially if you're doing music like up-tempo, like pop, rock, and things like that, where there's going to be driving eighth notes, and you've got a cymbal that just like,
right.
You really lose the subdivision. If you're doing like, you know, some Green Day kind of thing, ding, 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 and it's just,
right.
I mean, you've lost it. You've lost the drive
especially
of the band.
with cymbals, because you can't tune them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with drums, sometimes you can say like, you know what, let's bring them into the...
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to select good cymbals, because you're stuck with the sound.
Yeah, and you can't really go and gate it, and it's really difficult to go in and even use sample replacement tricks or something like that after the fact. So yeah, that's a really great trick for up-tempo music. There's doing a lot of ride cymbal, tightening that up with something like a moon gel, a little bit of tape.
I just have to say how much I enjoy this. This is how we spend the lunch and the dinner, like just to be, and what about this? And yeah, you're right.
Actually, we would have wine in our hands if this was exactly how we spent the lunch.
That's that's the thing.
So yes, this has been our life here in Italy, and
it's a good life.
It's a good life.
It's a good life.
And it's a dear friend of ours' birthday in literally minutes. And I think there's going to be some grappa poured. So we should let all of you go so we can actually go. Before we split, again, Benny's awesome, great player, but also awesome educator. Does camps all over the world and just about to release his second DVD. Go to BennyGreb.com, check out all that stuff, and he's all over YouTube.
Thank you
for stuff. And again, hit Recording Bootcamp if you want to learn more of this geeky nerd recording stuff that we all love. And and how to make drums go boom. So awesome.
Bam.
So I'm glad we finally got to do a record together.
Me too.
All right. Thank you so much, and have fun. Stay focused on the music, and we've got a birthday to celebrate. Bye.
Ciao. Come on, guys. Come on. Let me not sing alone. We'll do this again.
Tanti auguri a te.
Oh man, we could have gone on for hours. We didn't even talk about drum heads and tuning really. Like, it's great. And I had a couple of questions even.
It's so loud.
Super loud. It's insane.
It's amazing. Brava, Monica, brava.
Visto l'ha visto domenica, ma aveva mica sentito.
Wow.
Non riesco veramente a una magia sua, una magia, una puntina. Cosa sua.